We are back, folks. Apple Cideritis says, as far as passive-aggressive confrontation with Cybertruck drivers, often a thumbs down is more hurtful than a middle finger.
I like literally think about, and I can't do it because like obviously you don't want to do Nazi salutes in public, but they deserve to be ironically saluted at.
Oh, yes, yes. Or at the very least, go up to them. You can go up to them and say, like, hey, man, I really, really appreciate you standing with Elon Musk and, the reassertion of the white race in America or something. CPG Matt working to say Worcester as if Sam would manifest from the shadows if he got it wrong was truly fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. What'd you try to say?
I said Worcester.
Worcester. NB laborer patiently awaiting the Sam Bankman-Fried was too soon articles. Yeah, I mean, they learned nothing from that. They did the bad egg and off with them.
He was a Democrat.
Travis from Hartford, during the Kamala campaign, whenever someone would text me asking to vote, I'd always mention cozying up to crypto. I'd get canned messages excluding her standing by genocide, but when I press about crypto, it was silence. Interesting.
That's funny. I heard that they took people off the list when they mentioned Gaza.
I saw that online too, yeah.
Just another way they decided, made a conscious choice to demobilize their base ahead of what I think we can all recognize was a rather important election.
Yes,
to
pretty
support
important.
Israel and crypto.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen this dynamic so many times in different contexts about the Republicans embrace their base and what they want, and the Democrats say no, 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 whether it's from Bernie Sanders or just ending a genocide. They feel like they have there's no consequences because they can always
when they do it. Like 2020, they kneeled in kente cloths. They benefited from the George Floyd protests. They did. And that's because they co-opted it, frankly. Yeah. And I think it's good to have them win over Republicans. They also co-opted it in like 2008. A lot of the anti-war sentiment, like they can do it. It's just like sometimes they decide not to, and that is catastrophic for democracy.
It's crazy because I really do think that the specific kind of Democrat right now in Washington and the consultant ethos there, it's such a specific kind of brain rot that we don't see fully embraced by the governors in this country who were floated as potential 2024 replacements for Biden, even though it was really not possible once he chose to run again and technically won the primary. But they're more like Walz had that quote about how you accumulate political capital to burn it. And he did that in Minnesota. And you see it with Whitmer and you see it with Pritzker. And they're actually interested in governing and wielding power. And with the exception of AOC in Washington, I really don't see a 2028 frontrunner that can come out of our Washington establishment and meet the moment that we need. So yeah. I'm on the governor train or AOC because everybody else, they're just institutionalists.
The truth is I think what needs to happen, and one sort of cause for optimism is this labor action we're planning for that, and that's not the majority part, like Sean Fain and the teachers union and those folks are looking at for 2028. Because the truth is, FDR, which is what we need another New Deal to basically build anew for the next century. FDR didn't win promising a New Deal. He was promising things like balanced budgets and stuff like that. But the organization was such that there was no other ideas left over other than to massively expand the government to make up for suppressed demand because capitalism had finally died. We're in a similar situation now where when Biden came into office, he's talking about $2 trillion Build Back Better, which is ultimately winged. He's talking about the PRO Act. He's talking about $15 minimum wage because and not because like there's something essential about Joe Biden that one of those things, because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else. And what we saw is them trying to run a campaign on the nothing else. Like, we're going to do tax credits and we're going to not give you Medicare for all, but certain diseases that may affect you if you're certain identity groups. You might have some benefit in 10 years because of the research. Like, that stuff doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Ostentation says 100%. I'm thinking it might be Pritzker. Jody from Chicago said, hear me out, Pritzker AOC 2028. I texted that to Sam, I think, and he scolded me and said, stop thinking about 2028 this far out. But
because I don't trust any of the individuals I hear about. Whitmer, sorry, I'm not enthused about that. I'm not enthused about, well, obviously not Shapiro. Even Bashir, like, to me, it's the context around them.
Of course.
Pritzker, I think, does have class traitor possibility, though.
Okay, but can we just have some fun with it for a sec? Because it's the only way I feel like I have a sense of control. Pritzker AOC could be interesting. And if he does the FDR thing or whatever, like the billionaire that doesn't give a crap, and then she's the lieutenant, and we have a AMLO Scheinbaum situation.
Well, remember, FDR got rid of Wallace, so that I think...
Oh, he did get rid of Wallace. Yeah, but that was I mean, God, what was that, his third term?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pritzker's third term. I also want AOC as a senator.
Me too. And I think she's going to go for 2028 Schumer seat.
Yeah, that would be a massive upgrade.
Which would be huge, but like I think she could really. She is probably not arrogant enough to say I want to run for president in 2028. I think she's just a little bit more measured. But people are underestimating how well she could do in a primary. For like any woman under the age of 40 who's voting Democrat in a Democratic primary, you don't think she'd have an immediately very high floor. She's like a feminist icon for every woman I know. They would be voting for her. I really think that. And that will give her an immediate leg up as somebody who still is not New York DSA, but nationally endorsed as a DSA candidate. So I hope she considers it because also there's an issue with my gain again. So we just got to fix this because I'm always way too hot. IMers, yes. And I don't know why I'm always louder than everybody. Okay. Thank you, Jennifer from St. Louis, for pointing it out. All right, opening up the phone lines, 646-257-3920. Kowalski from Nebraska. The safety of the Ford Pinto was exaggerated extensively. It was more or less a victim of the media environment of its day. Unlike the Tesla, the Ford Pinto was actually made in large numbers, like over 10 million, and there were very few issues with the automobile itself during testing that passed union scrutiny. Back in the day, the Ford Pinto getting rear-ended by anything aside from a dump truck wouldn't necessarily cause it to catch fire. But today, our SUV pickup vehicle arms race of 4-ton monsters, a Tesla getting rear-ended, does have a chance of detonating a battery that would take 30,000 gallons of water to put out. Poof.
I mean, pedestrian deaths caused by drivers have been going up in this country for a long time. And it's because we've, decided every community needs to be a strip mall type wasteland.
Right. The circus in town says, good to see Emma back in the prediction game. That was no prediction. It was just wishful thinking.
With AOC, like, I've always thought a little bit too regional in her appeal, but I do think the last election where she outperformed Kamala by significant with particularly working class folks, I think the folks that and like Latinos and stuff that Democrats have lost because they have destroyed the candidate that could appeal to those people, like Bernie Sanders, Nevada, remember that? Yeah. I think she does. I think she's probably stronger than anybody in the left wing of Congress, certainly.
Yes. Well, now that we're on the topic of AOC, I did open up the phone lines, but let's do this because Matt just mentioned that, I guess it was last week at this point, AOC did a webinar informing people in her district and broadly of their rights if ICE comes knocking and tries to deport one of their family members or friends. And this caused a mass freakout on right-wing media. It's time, once again, for them to breathe new life into their psychosexual fixation with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And who better to do it than this, I don't know, this Harkonnen over
Obama
here.
appointee?
Yeah, the least articulate thumb in the world, who just basically decided that he wasn't going to leave Midtown Manhattan yesterday, and he went on Newsmax and like 6 different, I'm barely exaggerating, I think it was 4 different Fox News shows to talk about AOC. So here is Homan earlier in the day on with Bill Hemmer, who almost seems exasperated with him. He's the border czar, Homan. Not sure what authority he really has, except to just be a fascist in public for Donald Trump.
Heard you talking about AOC over the weekend. Do you believe she is breaking the law?
I'll leave that up to DOJ. What I find disturbing is that any member of Congress wants to educate people how they evade law enforcement. You can claim you're educating those constitutional rights. Okay, you can keep that claim. What she in fact is doing is telling people don't open your door, hide in your home, don't talk to ICE. We're talking about people who are in the country illegally, committed a crime, they're a public safety threat, they've been convicted of serious crime, and they've been ordered removed by a federal judge. So it's like AOC and others don't want ICE to enforce the laws that they enacted. She's a member of Congress. Let us enforce the laws you enacted. That's what we're supposed to do.
You can't go after her. Do you think others should?
Crazy question.
No, I think I've asked DOJ, where's that line of impediment, of interference? Now, if someone stands in your way, prevents you from arresting somebody, put your hands on you, that's impediment.
What?
But what line is telling people to hide from ICE, not open the door? Where do you cross that line on impediment? So I've simply asked the Department of Justice, give us that line.
You have talked to them about this. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Wow. We'll see where that goes. Tom Homan, I'm out of time.
Wow. So this is him saying essentially that he is directing the Department of Justice to look in one of Donald Trump's political enemies because AOC dared to have a webinar where she just explicitly delineated people's Fourth Amendment rights that prevents unreasonable search and seizure. I want to make sure that I have the exact wording correct. Yes, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So that does require specificity about the warrant. Now, the Supreme Court has eroded this right over and over again. But you can, I mean, as the Trump administration flagrantly violates the law when there are judges telling, say, like Elon Musk, that he has no right to access this Treasury Department's most private information, and they're just doing it anyway. Now, Homan is going to go on TV and say that he's directing an investigation by the Justice Department that's now currently extorting the mayor of New York City to enforce their immigration policies and raids. He's saying, well, because this congresswoman from the same city isn't abiding by what we want, well, we'll drop prosecution in one instance because we can force the guy to do what we want. But in the instance where this congresswoman is not abiding by what we want, yeah, we're going to try to prosecute her. That's basically what he's saying. I mean, the administration fully hasn't said it, but he's the border czar. He's a representative of the administration. He was on CNN saying the same thing. Here he is on Newsmax, you know, with his opinions about her intelligence. It's so weird.
This guy?
How this guy
Who sounds like a bulldog that's been like inbred for 30 generations trying to breathe. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. This Rhodes Scholar says
he does look like he's wasting away, which is, you know, something we can all celebrate.
Yes. I mean, he that would be nice. I would like to see that happen, maybe on air, live. He, of course, he's calling her dumb here. That's what you do when you're, you got to put down a strong woman.
Well, first of all, I think she's, you know, I won't go after her on
Tom, please do. Please do. Say what's on your mind. It's a holiday.
Look, she's the dumbest congresswoman ever elected to the Congress, and she proves that every day. And
You're
look,
slurring your words.
I can't believe any member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, Independent, would want to educate criminal illegal aliens who are in the country illegally, been convicted of a violent crime, and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge after
sorry,
due
but
process.
pause it. That's always a tell when they have to lean on the been convicted of a violent crime thing, because that's not, we know that that's not who they're going after. They think this Nazi here thinks that being in this country undocumented is the violent crime. It's violence against whiteness.
Right.
And the Fox News, like he says, Hammer said, do you have anybody else going after her? That is a very dangerous thing to say in this country when Congress people have been shot up by the right wing on that. And
Gabby Giffords was shot by a right winger. What was that, 10 years ago?
Exactly. And here's something for all the Nazis who think like this Homan guy has something to say. Undocumented people have rights, you stupid assholes. They have rights.
Yes. They do. And to bolster Matt's, well, let's finish what he has to say, and then I want to bolster Matt's point about who's actually being detained right now by ICE.
Violent crime, and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge after due process at great taxpayer expense. You got a congressman or congresswoman that does not want ICE to do the job that Congress has mandated them to do and funds them to do.
I cannot believe that this person has such little self-awareness that he just called her dumb. I mean, I can barely understand what you know, Humpty Dumpty is saying here, but
called radical by Mao.
This came out on Friday. This is actually a great. This is some of the folks over on Substack are doing really good work on immigration, because a lot of our mainstream media is not touching this, and they're just regurgitating the criminal talking point that Matt just alluded to. So ICE's, according to Austin Coker on Substack, ICE's latest detention data shows growth of immigrants targeted with no criminal histories, exactly as predicted.
Who could have saw that coming?
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, released new detention data today that objectively confirms widespread reports that ICE's enforcement surge has largely targeted immigrants without criminal convictions or criminal charges, contrary to the Trump administration's baseless public assertions. The data is clear on this point, and then Coker explains. ICE's detention data reflects the total detained population on a single day. It does not reflect the total number of people detained and released, blah, blah, blah. So they're just giving some background about the data. But you can see in this chart here the number of people detained by ICE, and you can see that escalation. As of February 9th, ICE's total detained population reached 41,169. ICE's total detained population is now higher than at any point in the Biden administration. And for the first time since the pandemic, those numbers have crossed 40,000.
It's interesting that CBP's numbers haven't gone up. It seems like ICE is more responsive to the incoming fascists than CBP.
Yes. This growth is due entirely to the people detained by ICE rather than by Customs and Border Patrol protection. So you can see like the border CBP would be at the border. This is basically about the raids.
Right.
The number of people booked in by CBP declined by 2,491, while the number booked in by ICE increased 4,422. It was the largest single bi-weekly increase in people detained by ICE since at early 2021, again in the pandemic. So that clearly indicates to you that despite them talking about their fears at the border, the number of detentions is declining there because they are reallocating their resources to raids of folks and terrorizing people. And then here it is with the criminal history. This is the chart that they tabulated. Immigrants with criminal convictions made up the largest group of people in detention at the start of the Trump administration, in no small part due to the laws around how ICE is required to detain, as well as the priorities of the Biden administration. That was a continuation of the of the Obama policy, which was deportations targeted towards people with criminal histories. That's what the Trump administration is claiming they're doing, but they're lying. The number of those individuals did go up from about 9,300 to about 10,500. The total number of people detained with pending criminal charges also increased. But the largest objective growth in people detained came from immigrants with no other criminal histories. This group increased by almost 2,000 in about 2 weeks. This group also grew proportionally from 6% to 14% of people all detained. And then I just want to get to the chart below, the bar graph. Here it is. Relative growth of detained immigrants by criminal history. other immigration violators, 3.2 times growth of the others in the Trump administration. So,
and the convicted criminal thing can only grow so much because that's already been a point of emphasis for over a decade by all administrations.
by both Biden and Obama, and of course Trump. So you can see that the growth of the people who don't have either convictions or pending criminal charges is multiple times more than that of those with records or with convictions. So there you have it, folks.
And so if somebody said, for instance, that his main complaint, sorry to get into this, but there's commentators that I think should issue corrections on some of their statements. Cenk Uygur, January 27, said the Colombian president started the fight on accepting undocumented immigrants back into his country. His main complaint was that they were coming on a military plane, and that's inhumane treatment. Good news, you can treat them as humanely as you like when you have them back. Did Trump threatening sanctions
Can you
work?
put that up? I want to read this.
Yeah, I'll put this in. I'll put it in Slack right
I
here.
hadn't seen this, so.
This is the last time I respond to this, which is, I think, a heinous tweet, frankly, disgusting at the time. Did Trump threatening sanctions work to resolve this? Yes, that's a fact. Was there much substance to the original complaint? To be honest, no. I think the real substantive fight is over who to deport. If they're convicted felons, their comfort on the plane is not my top concern. Now, everyone that had been following this knew that not to grant the premise that if the so-called, if they're convicted felons, their comfort on the plane is not my top concern. It is insanely discrediting that he even thought to tweet that out, because everyone knows that the rise is going to be in people who aren't. And now we have people like in Costa Rica and all these countries taking people like, say, one story I think we saw in the news back today of a woman who was seen through a window being held at a hotel. And she held up a sign that says Afghanistan. And then she held up her hands to say, to make a plane symbol, and then mimicked her head getting cut off, saying that if I get sent back to Afghanistan, I will be killed. That is happening all over because of this. And these people are not criminals.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess I hadn't seen this particular tweet. It's hard to see anything on Twitter these days. But so the Colombian president basically had, at this time, rejected the usage of military planes that the Trump administration was trying to use to deport undocumented people back to Colombia because of the extreme history of U.S. military intervention in Latin America and what that would mean, and the fact that he didn't like that they were being treated as criminals when they were essentially just trying to come to the United States to make a better life for themselves. And the Trump administration, didn't they basically capitulate on that? I forget exactly the details.
They eventually forced them to take the planes because they were much more powerful than Colombia is.
But yeah.
Well, with that too is it's sort of they interpreted that as if it was a victory when really they just kind of did what Petro asked them to do, which is officialize it by have the migrants on the military planes,
right? And
said it was just a victory because they threatened Petro with tariffs. Therefore, he said, okay, do it on the military planes, even though that's what usually how they would get those migrants there in the first place, which is on military planes as opposed to a chartered flight or something like that.
Right. And the second part that Matt read here about the top concern being people's comfort. Why is the top concern them not having comfort? I mean, this is the odd thing, it's
pandering.
Well, no, I mean, actually, I used to be, again, when I got hired there, I was a huge fan of their show for a while, and I remember back in the day, they did a segment about Anders Breivik, the killer in
Norwegian
Norway,
mass shooter,
or stabber, right? Or he was a
Breivik set off a bomb in Oslo, I think, right? Or maybe it was Sorry, I
can't remember, but he was a mass killer, horrific human being
that went up and shot like a young labor sort of camp after he set off a bomb in one of the major cities in.
Yeah, it was a bombing and a shooting. Yeah,
and, and I remember he was. They showed basically the conditions of the jail that he is in, where he will be in for the rest of his life. But the court system there, you just have to renew it over and over again. So there's no life sentence, but he will be there for the rest of his life. And the fact that he had a TV and like it looked like a dorm, as they do all across many, prisons in Scandinavia. I remember Cenk was very unhappy with that. So I don't necessarily know if this is pandering. I do think it's just a difference in ideology where I do not believe that carceral punishment is an effective way to make us safer for the most part. If there are dangerous criminals like Breivik, as long as they are kept away from the rest of society so they don't commit mass atrocities, I do not believe that they should be held in inhumane conditions. We know that solitary confinement is regularly used against prisoners like, say, Chelsea Manning or other people who may, God forbid, read a magazine, which literally really drives people insane and has no positive effect on society. That's what our prison system is like. It's a system of abuse as opposed to one that is oriented towards rehabilitation. So my point here is that I don't actually think it's pandering. I do think it's a difference in ideology where one, he's pandering by granting the premise that these are criminals, which we just showed the data that they're obviously not. But it's a difference in between, a more right-wing reactionary viewpoint, which is what that show is now, and one that's based in humanism and about creating structures that aren't about inflicting pain really on anybody, but about keeping us all safe.
Yeah, because Emma, quick questions. Do you know where MS-13 came from?
It is a gang from...
U.S. prison system.
Oh,
do you know where Tren de Aragua came from?
U.S. prison system?
Venezuelan prison system.
Oh.
It turns out that just caging people in mass doesn't actually solve the problems that some of the same people like to think are the most important and urgently addressed. It turns out that prison might actually be a networking opportunity for criminals.
Yes, I think that's kind of well established, but people pretend not to care because they like the punishment aspect.
Exactly. And also there's, an audience ready for sort of pro-mass crime stuff, which we've witnessed even before in so-called independent media, investor-taking media, and the mass media. They love to lead with these sorts of stories.
Well, let's take a call, and then I wanted to do this federal worker story, which is really important, but I've had some folks on the line for a second. Calling from a 585 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
This is you.
Hi, this is Brandon from Rochester. I called in before, I think, and at the time you suggested, or I wanted to debate Sam before, and you said you could take down my number to greenlight that. I'd probably call back in later the week if you're still open for that.
He's not here this whole week, but you can call in next week if you want to debate him in particular.
Sure. Yeah, I'll probably do that.
All right.
Sure. And besides that, the only thing that I knew that I don't know if you guys heard, I don't think I heard you read him today, but ExpressVPN is unfortunately owned by Cape Technologies, which is a technology firm owned by Teddy Sagi, who's an Israeli billionaire who made most of his money by founding a gambling software support company. So,
okay.
Unfortunately, he owns shit tons of stuff. I didn't know it, but my VPN, who's a different provider, which I thought was decent, is also owned by him. So he owns loads of shit.
Okay, well, we're writing that down now, and we'll make sure to flag it. Thanks for letting us know.
Yep, cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, generally when it comes to that stuff, it's less about the nationality of the people than if they're on explicitly the BDS boycott list.
Yeah. To be honest, that's kind of the guide that we use, but this is a little above my pay grade, but we did write it down.
Or if they're, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure actually the West Bank making company, the West Bank linen company was actually on the BDS list.
Yes, that's why we said no to them. Ryan and Callie, Anders Breivik's cell is better than my apartment, but as long as he's unable to murder her children, I'm okay with that. Right, exactly. Dave from Jamaica, I'll be honest, Cenk, like a lot of people, confuses toughness with effectiveness. Portland Pete, also, someone being a convicted felon doesn't mean it's okay to treat them poorly. Democrats get way too excited about making bad people suffer. It's wrong.
Oh yeah, remember how people thought the calling Trump a convicted felon thing was going to work? Did that work?
Yeah, it didn't work great.
Didn't do nothing.
Jerry at the beach. This Tom Homan guy looked like he shit on the television today, slurring his words, bald head, looking extremely thumb-like, very, very disrespectful. Company Townie, it's wild to call AOC the dumbest person in Congress when Boebert and MTG exist. Yeah.
Looks like Droopy Dog.
He does. He does look like that. Teacher Dan 20, my grandfather had a cleft palate in his face. His upper lip looked a lot like that, even worse, and his voice sounded a little like that, even worse. I have no doubt this guy is an asshole, but don't pick on the way he talks.
Homan have a cleft palate? I don't notice that.
Beg to differ. Yeah. I'm sorry. This was the same thing. Like RFK, I understand. Junior, I know he has an affliction, but you cross a certain level of being a bad person, I'm gonna make fun of you about everything.
Yeah.
Sorry. Obvious books. Obama was the first to appoint Tom Homan and even awarded him a citation. I remember. Yeah. Al Sonic from Pittsburgh. I want to warn that Zuckerberg may run for president. He explored this in 2017. He went to a farm in Iowa. He's obsessed with the Roman Emperor Augustus. Is that why he had that haircut before? He's truly scary. A friend of his has stated he wants to be an emperor of the world. I guarantee he gets divorced and runs as a Republican. He definitely seems like he's getting divorced, but he's like arguably more uncharismatic than Elon Musk.
Who are we talking about?
Yeah, Zuckerberg is not going to be be the nominee for president. DSA Aaron in Atlanta, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are even better than AOC, but they are more brown, so it could never happen. Well, also, Rashida Tlaib could run, but Ilhan Omar was not born in the United States, so she can't run for president.
Indiana voted for Barack Obama. Like, I think people need to stop overemphasizing things like women can't win or brown people can't win in this country. I think it's somewhat self-defeating.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say women can't win, but I would say that I think it's important to recognize how more limited many women in a traditional political context may feel expressing themselves, and how there may be reflexive reactions to them that are still deeply ingrained. I mean, as Sam says, when he was a kid, his mom couldn't get a credit card in his name. It's not a shock that there are some people who can't reflexively see a woman in an authority position, but it does, I think, depend on the campaign. Like, if AOC were to run on a campaign that will change people's lives, she's going to face an incredible amount of sexism, as she does, as we just played with Tom Homan. But can that transcend that? I mean, that is an open question to me.
I think in order to be a first, you need to actually have some offering people something. I think Obama offered something. I think the two women who have been at the top of the ticket were maybe two of the worst politicians in my lifetime, and they shouldn't have been. And it was a failing of the party to elevate them into.
But Biden was a horrible politician, and he beat Donald Trump.
But Biden was running on stuff. Biden ran on a public option. Like,
he said he would veto Medicare for all.
That's true,
race.
But he ran on a public option.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Build Back Better, $1 trillion thing, PRO Act, like all this stuff was de-emphasized. And also, I think.
But the nature of the attack is so different. Like, I mean, Biden gets this inherent baked-in credibility when I don't know if Hillary Clinton's campaign was that dissimilar from his. I mean, Kamala's was more conservative. I would agree with that. But she incorporated some of Sanders's policies into her platform, and like
Clinton ran saying, "Don't look into my speeches to Goldman Sachs." Like, I think she couldn't have been worse for that moment.
Biden ran and said, "What, like with the immigration stuff? What, go to Trump, he'll deport you." Like, we could come up with a million different examples, but I just think it. Our audience is 82% male, right? I just saw this statistic the other day. If you're a woman watching this show, right, I think that there's probably, some that you probably understand a little bit about how you have to essentially tailor your speech to fit into certain boxes. It may not necessarily be the case, but that is how American politics functions, in that you can't be too aggressive or you're seen as a bitch. You can't be too emotional or you're seen as unfit to lead. And there's very little room to navigate in the middle of that. And I think both Harris and Clinton were hampered by it. But Hillary had more baggage, and Kamala's campaign was more uninspired. I don't know.
I think that's, again, like, I think you do need to be, in order to be a first and break one of these barriers, you do need to be an exemplary candidate. But I also, like, can't help on this topic remembering that Bernie Sanders was smeared in 2020 as a sexist for allegedly having a similar sort of concern. That, I will say, you can go back, I thought was overblown if that was sincere concern of his at the time. But look, I agree that we should be able to have these conversations, but I think the way that they're deployed is dangerous, because it wasn't, we need to take this seriously when Bernie was supposedly saying it to Elizabeth Warren, it was, look at that sexist. But
the way that it's deployed on the internet is different than how normal people are engaging with it, which I think,
I mean by the party, though.
By the party, they're going to use it all as an excuse. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't, at the same time, talk about the, like, undergirding reactionary moment of, like, sexism and misogyny that we're in right now, which I do think is informing a lot of the politics, as it did with the rise of the Nazis, when it was a third of the population was unemployed, and Hitler and the Nazis talked about this renewed sense of masculinity, which gave these men purpose, and then also gave them benefits to keep the women in the home so they could produce Aryan children. This is not a new thing. And in a country like ours, when we see women leaders across the West get elected, with Scheinbaum being a notable exception, they're either conservatives or they're centrists. What's the leftist female leader in the West that has gotten elected under a patriarchal, like, Christian society? I mean, it's very rare. We have such a dearth of female senators too. So there is, and I can say from personal experience, a harder time sometimes getting your perspective taken seriously as a woman, where it's seen as, like, when they would say about Kamala, she has no details. I mean, she didn't have a vision, but she had way more details than Donald Trump. Trump came out there and said they're eating cats and dogs. No. And I just want to make sure that, and with the Bernie thing, Bernie, of course, wasn't a sexist, but there was sometimes, like, there's a style, there's a militancy and an uncompromising nature, which is a good thing in any leftist political movement, but that can sometimes feel a little bit like women don't understand necessarily what their place is in that movement. And I'm still struggling to try to find a way to, like, I don't know, make that a part of my coverage in a way that also doesn't validate the bad faith concerns that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, does this impact your AOC 2028 stuff? Because it doesn't for me. If she wins the primary, I'm willing to go to bat for that.
I think she could win based on what we're saying, because she could have an agenda that's transformative, and then, the issues that we're talking about matter less. But I also, I don't want to belittle it, because I do think it's a real thing, and, particularly reflective of, like, I don't know, some things that I think the left could work on, being more inclusive in that way. Dave from Upstate says, Emma, did you ever consider you lack a mission? I did not consider that. DSA Aaron in Atlanta said there were Bernie bros that were sexist, but Bernie wasn't. Exactly right. I mean, but there were going to be sexists in all, like, Biden was sexist and racist in the way that he put Kamala in the corner and didn't actually groom her to be his successor. He used her as a prop and then moved on with his life. These are just very insidious things that are, it's, as Sam would say, it's harder sometimes to identify misogyny than it is racism. Morpheus says, have you guys seen RFK saying that SSRIs are harder to quit than heroin and leads to violence in children, as if his positions on vaccines weren't awful enough? Going after antidepressants is increasingly dangerous, especially when considering the precarious state of our mental health care infrastructure. Yikes. I mean, this is the quackery that, do you remember when Tom Cruise was obsessed with this via Scientology? That's when he got into that fight with Matt Lauer. This has been anti-SSRIs has been a part of, like, crank culty weird fixations for decades now. But yeah, it's being formalized with RFK. Jody from Chicago. More importantly, who do you think the DNC wants to be the nominee in 2028? Mr. Corporate Tax Cuts, right? Yes, Josh Shapiro.
Which is why I think people need to focus on organizing both as tenants and workers, because this party's, I think, toast.
Matt, I guess, says, not a female viewer, but I agree with Emma on this one. There is not an insignificant amount of voters who will be very reluctant to vote for a woman or person of color, and another that will be motivated to vote against them. It can be overcome, but they have to account for it. I think that's my point, too. It can definitely be overcome with the right candidate.
Because both those elections were close.
Right. 100%. It can be overcome with the right candidate, and to Matt's point, too, by party leadership, it is often used as it's a both classist and like coastal minimization of like states in the middle of the country that they can just never accept somebody. As Matt says, they did vote for Obama. That's a man. It's a bit of a different situation, but
I think I just would say, like, I think Bernie supporters are the best thing in the Democratic coalition, and there's a lot of different pathologies that are exhibited throughout different types of voting blocks. And I think it's very suspicious that in 2016 and 2020, ahead of Iowa, it was Bernie is sexist. And also Bernie Bros, I think, was as like, I think that's elites looking at the mob saying we need to discipline those people. And I think it's being dressed up in different language.
Yeah, I think from how that was deployed by them, that's definitely accurate. Wallace and Gromit fan 247 thoughts about potential Tim Walz 2028 run. His track record of actually using power in a partisan way when Democrats took control of the Minnesota legislature by the slimmest of margins is exactly what would have translated at the national level. If no other viable progressives run, he may be the strongest contender for the left. Plus, if he were to become the nominee, imagine how Shapiro would feel. I think he's going to be, unfortunately, a little too tainted by that last campaign.
I agree. I think they blew his political. I think it's funny. The guy in a rush to blow his political capital got it,
I know,
stolen and blown by a campaign that didn't even really reflect him.
I know. It's a shame because he really is. He's one of our better Democrats. All right, let's do. Okay, this is what I wanted to do, the federal workers thing. Yeah, Bradley, the right. If you could just pull up that, and then also the Kyle Cheney tweet. So there were letters that were sent to a bunch of federal employees to notify them that they have been fired from different agencies. And these letters from Elon Musk and Trump and Doge essentially cite poor work performance as a reason for termination in many of these firings. And that's basically targeting this classification of workers in the federal workforce that go as probationary workers. Now, they're not on probation. They're not doing anything wrong. It just is like a classification in the federal government that involves the amount of time that you've been working there. And sometimes if you move from different agencies, you will be classified as probationary. So you have probationary status typically if you are somebody who's worked for the federal government for less than 2 years before you move to a more protected status where you receive full civil service protections. But you can also be probationary temporarily, which has happened on occasion with some of these fired workers, if you're moving in between agencies. So these are the folks who are being targeted right now by these cuts by Elon Musk. And at things like the FAA and the Department of Transportation, some of these employees are being told that they're being fired for poor performance. But the managers are leaking to the press. No. Most of these employees have been shown, and we have it documented based on their performance reviews, as being essentially exceptional performers by their superiors. But this is something that Elon Musk did with the Twitter layoffs, which is that he wants to fire them for poor performance so the federal government doesn't have to pay their full benefits. And that offer for severance or whatever is also a scam because it doesn't essentially guarantee the full payout, if I'm not mistaken, Bradley. right? That's the case with some of those severance packages. It's a little bit unclear. We don't need to look it up right now, but just putting that caveat in. And the reality is that these are real people, millions of federal workers who, many of whom who have dedicated their lives to making this world a better place. Sam interviewed that NLRB person who said it was her life's dream. She got her master's in this particular field, invested, and could be subjected to the whims of a billionaire who doesn't like the fact that we have labor protections in this country. But these are some of the stories. If you could just scroll down, Bradley, to the bottom where it says above fully successful, that part. And I just want to credit the Washington Post, in particular my buddy Jeff Stein, who has really been, I guess this isn't Jeff, but another Washington Post piece. This is by Hannah Nathanson, Lisa Ryan, and Emily Davies. But Jeff's been doing great work as well.
Yeah, the colleagues of Jeff.
Colleagues of Jeff. Sorry to Jeff, you can get credit too. So they're publishing here some of the stories of the people that have been fired, and I just wanted to read this to people because, again, they're real human beings. One transportation department worker found out he was fired on Valentine's Day just after putting his children to bed as he sat down to watch a movie with his wife. An agriculture employee discovered he was terminated the morning after attending an ex-partner's funeral. A Natural Resource Conservation Service employee was cut months after the government paid $20,000 to relocate his family to North Dakota. Others targeted in the wave of firings fixated on the emails explaining why, struggling to understand. Employees who were told their performance was at issue said they had earned evaluations reviewed by the Post that offered evidence of their good work. Above fully successful, read a November assessment of a Fire General Services Administration worker. An outstanding year, consistently exceeding expectations, stated the review for a former NIH employee whose manager credited her for mastering a steep learning curve and becoming an invaluable asset. One well-rated Veterans Affairs staffer texted her boss to complain after she was fired. In text messages obtained by the Post, he replied, "It states it's due to your performance, which is not true. Your performance has nothing to do with this." Others were stunned to find themselves included in the probationary category, including a federal nurse with more than 5 years of government employment who recently moved under military orders with her spouse and had to switch agencies as a result, now out of a job. So that's what I was referring to there as one of the kind of flaws here, where she did serve for over the 2-year period to get past being probationary, but she ended up still getting fired because she had to switch agencies. A veteran of the National Park Service who has worked at parks including Yosemite, Shenandoah, and the Great Smoky Mountains, last year left a permanent position to accept a promotion in a new park. There she was told she'd have to serve 1 year of probation. On Valentine's Day, she was fired for performance and ending a quarter century of service. "It is very brutal," she said, "especially after working and dedicating most of my life to the NPS." So those are two examples there, and I want to get to the final one that broke my heart in a second, of people who have gone past that 2-year probationary period, but because they had to switch over agencies, or this person who worked for nearly 25 years in the National Park Service was told she'd receive a promotion, but she just had to serve 1 year as a technicality in that period, ended up getting fired because, the Doge groypers put it into an algorithm and she was classified as probationary. So, same as the nurse who has a military spouse who had to be temporarily probationary because she switched agencies. Now, here's the one at the end that they ended this article with. Sorry for construction noise out there, folks, if you're hearing that. Luke Graziani, a disabled Army veteran, was 5 weeks from completing his probation year on Friday when he logged into his work computer at the Bronx Veterans Affairs Hospital. Waiting on the screen was a boilerplate termination email citing performance concerns. Graziani printed out the message and took it to his boss, who was shocked, and promised to submit a request for exemption. "You're critical staff," Graziani recalled his boss saying. "We're going to try." Graziani, who is 45 and has 4 children, had believed until this weekend that his veteran status would protect his job. He served 20 years in the Army, first as a supply specialist and then in public affairs, deploying for 2 tours in Iraq and another 2 in Afghanistan before retiring in 2023. In the hour,
JD Vance did.
yeah, but apparently similar actually time as Tim Walz, who just came up, that was accused of stolen valor by JD Vance and co. In the hours after his termination, Graziani tried to figure out what to do. Then he thought of Douglas A. Collins, a newly appointed Veteran Affairs Secretary, who vowed in his confirmation hearing that he will not stop until we succeed on behalf of the men and women who have worn the uniform. Graziani sat down and composed a letter. You see, I am a veteran too, just like you, Secretary Collins. I spent those same hot nights in Iraq, waiting for the all clear after an incoming round set off the alert system, praying that there wouldn't be another, he wrote. Then he asked for his job back. This can't be how my service to my country ends. As of Monday, Collins had not replied. So, that's that. Another effect of the cuts was this USAID thing. There were many U.S. personnel overseas when they just decided to cut it off, including this woman and her husband, who is now suing the Trump administration over this, and I think under a pseudonym, so we don't have their full name. It's as, the Jane Doe or ex-Joe, et cetera. So this is Kyle Cheney of Politico. We could just go to his summary. Another medical horror story in a court affidavit from a USAID employee stationed overseas says his pregnant wife was not medically evacuated, for emergency health care because of directives from Washington. Took intervention of a U.S. senator to reverse, but it was too late. Now, it seems like the pregnancy was okay, but she needed to be medically evacuated, and she could not. Cheney continues in the second part of this thread. The employee, identified only as Terry Doe, says he's been in touch with 25 other pregnant Foreign Service officers who are fearful their care will be cut off if the agency closes down completely on March 8th. So, there you have it, folks.
Relatedly, there's a Bloomberg article. Food head at FDA resigns, citing numerous job cuts in division. Now, this one's interesting to me because it goes at one of the core central brand propositions that got a lot of rubes to support this administration this time. Because the guy, Jim Jones, the head of the food division of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, who oversaw the agency's banning of the food dye Red No. 3 earlier this year, stepped down on Monday. So the entire point of the sort of Maha bullshit that, people like Russell Brand and stuff are paid to pretend is real, because I do think that was a real part of the coalition that Trump added this time, was people who are upset at the type of garbage that capitalists pump into our food. Not really addressing that, turns out. Get rid of the guy who actually was addressing these things, because who cares? And there's a piece here, if you can just pull up this Carl Bayer piece, which I think is important, because I think some people on the left are, for some reason, persuaded by writers like Leighton Woodhouse at Compact Magazine, who's sort of like a Timu Michael Schellenberger.
Curious who you're referring to.
He had this article. So Carl's, go up to the top of Carl's. Carl's is, no federal workers are not, quote, elites. I regret to inform you that Compact Magazine is at it again. I would go check out carlbayer.com because he responds to Compact Magazine's assertion that these are somehow elite. When I would say the hacks like Leighton Woodhouse and Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and all these sort of like for-hire mercenary hacks, you're more of the elites than these people who work in whatever fucking administration that they were employed at.
You mean the 30,000 federal workers in Kansas City, the city's largest employer, are not as economic elite as Matt Iglesias, whose pieces are regularly read by people in the Biden administration?
Yeah, I think, and I know a lot of people aren't persuaded by this sort of stuff, but there are a few people that seem to think that these sort of losers have a point, and no, they're charlatans.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Will from Indiana, I'm going to start a poly-market bet to see whether or not Tom Homan uncontrollably sobs on air about AOC. Dude is clearly infatuated. Given the alternative, this is probably what we want more from our border czars. Speaking of Will from Indiana, we'll put a link to this below, but I did do Will's podcast yesterday. Will, great friend and fan of the show, a regular IMer into ESPN and into the Majority Report, as I just read. His podcast is called Crimson Misery. He covers college basketball, among other things, but we talked about a lot of things, the Democrats, the NFL, the traders, if you're into reality TV. So check it out, folks. Crimson Misery. Was really fun getting to talk to Will yesterday. International Socialists. Anti-SSRIs is not a crank issue. Lots of gold standard studies, double-blind and systematic reviews show SSRIs are about effective as placebo in mild, moderate depression. You should get a good socialist mental health service user and activist to explain the issues of SSRIs and side effects and dependency, stopping medication, and other ways Big Pharma hid the evidence of their own problems with SSRIs. They are the benzodiazepines of this age. To be honest with you, that is not the kind of content that I want to put out there. SSRIs help a lot of people, and I don't necessarily think that the science is clear enough to cast aspersions on it right now. I
agree. I don't think I don't think the evidence is clear. I think I've seen contrary assertions that actually conditions are worsening in society that might be a reason for, like, maybe these things do work, but just not enough to counteract the
capitalism,
increasing alienation in society.
Yeah.
Look, this is not a sort of medical show.
Yes.
But I don't think that's. I mean, I think there is a worry over a lot of this stuff that can be critiqued, but I don't think it's clear enough to say that.
Okay, let's take another call here. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Sean. I'm calling from Washington State. How are you today?
Doing well, Sean. How are you?
Doing well too, thanks. So I just wanted to call and follow up sort of on one of the comments that Matt was saying and you about these federal workers not being elite. You know, living out west, one of the main ways in which I interact with our federal government is through resource agencies, and I hunt and I do other things outside. And when about 3,400 Forest Service employees were fired as a result of these cuts, and when I became aware of this, I reached out to some hunting and conservation groups that I'm a part of, and I asked them to stand up for these workers. And it was just amazing to see some of the comments that people who are supposedly, avid users of our public land, they believe that these cuts were going to be made primarily to elites. There are no elites in the Forest Service. Upper management. That's not what happened. These cuts are to working people who live, especially in these resource agencies like the BLM and Forest Service. They live in very remote areas where oftentimes these agencies or these offices, ranger districts, those sort of things, are one of the larger employers. I mean, remote central Idaho, remote southeastern Oregon, remote northeastern Washington, Montana, Wyoming. These places are not.
I know, but
it's just shocking.
Well, this is where the Democrats need to take a federal worker who's from one of the areas you're talking about and come up with some grandstanding bill about protecting the federal workforce, like the Lake and Riley Act, and say, yeah, it's the Luke Graziano Act, protecting our veterans from Doge and Donald Trump and billionaires. Now, do it now. Because what you're saying is they have left a vacuum on so many issues, but including this one, that they could be categorizing these federal workers as your neighbors as opposed to faceless bureaucrats, which is entirely a right-wing ideology. But you have guys like Josh Shapiro coming out and saying, we've got to be efficient. You've got Moskowitz or whatever that freak's name is on the Doge caucus endorsing all this kind of thing. And then you have Hakeem Jeffries, I guess, with his thumb up his ass and waiting and waiting and waiting so they can use this as leverage in the budget negotiations. But if we had a functioning political party, like, this was better with Alan Grayson going on the House floor and saying the Republicans' healthcare plan for you is to die quickly. Where is that right now? Who is our version of that?
Yeah. A lot of it is the efficiency mindset, which efficiency, when said by these people, is profit maximization and more money for speculators who should be taxed way more than they already are, to even more money for them to play with. But I completely agree. I come from a semi conservative background, hunted multiple times a year, multiple different types of licenses, but also come from a family that knows the importance of like a game and fish department for making sure that all this stuff is regulated. But I know, like, frankly, a lot of hunters are weekend warriors who just buy the fucking gear and go like Donald Trump Jr. it for the weekend and don't give a fuck about the land that they're on because they're probably on some rich guy's land anyway. Like, there's no sort of actual stewardship thing there. And one of the big laments I've had, like, is that people who do hunt and do enjoy the outdoors completely missed what capitalists are doing to all of that shit. And it's not because like environmentalists off-put them. It's because corporate propaganda has completely blinded them to the threat that's coming for their lands, to continue privatization it, to make it really what hunting is in the UK, which is a rich man's hobby.
Yeah. That's 100% right. That is 100% right. And, you know, I don't know if you guys are aware of this because living back east, and I'm not sure, I don't get the impression that you're plugged into you know, the things that go on in the hunting community, maybe the public lands arena. But there was a lawsuit that was filed by the state of Utah, essentially to declare basically unappropriated, which means unimproved federal lands that were managed by the BLM. Basically, give those back to the state of Utah. There is a real push in Western states to have our public land turned over to these states that have no budget to manage them. And then what will happen is that public land will be sold off to developers and capitalists. And these people who think that they
for like mineral mining
who
too.
Enjoy, yeah, well, or like yes, and possibly ski resorts, possibly housing developments. You know, things. Yeah. The one interesting thing is, you know, Donald Trump, you know, during the campaign, you know, discussed the possibility of developing some of these federal lands. There's no water to live in these arid public lands. I'm sorry, these Western public lands are extremely arid. You cannot develop those lands for like dense housing. And the Colorado River is already overly appropriated, which is, you know, a lot of the Bureau of Land Management land is in that, you know, Colorado River basin. So the point of it is, this is an attempt to privatize our public land. It is a first step to privatizing our public land. You know, they've cut the government. They're going to, now the next thing will be, see how poorly our public land is being administered because it's owned by the government. Private enterprise can do better. Let's work towards privatizing this land. And then it will be accessible only to the elites.
Yep. I mean, that's the model. Have you heard of Big Sky in Montana?
Yes.
I mean, that's the model, right? Like I believe, or maybe it's not that exact resort, but there's a resort next door that's just a private mountain. Yep. Like Tom Brady, I think, has a house there or whatever. Like
owned by a Massachusetts-based hedge fund.
Right.
Entire town.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and this is the network state that the tech guys are talking about too.
That's right. Well, I'll say this. You know, Matt was talking about Western hunting turning into something like it is in Europe for only the truly wealthy. That is what's happening. And, you know, there are people who, like for instance, you know, Joe Rogan, who goes and hunts on these private tracts where he gets a hunt. I don't know if he gets it for free or not, but he's basically hunting on these what are effectively private game preserves that are abutted by public land, but to which the public cannot get access to. And the hunt itself is worth tens of thousands of dollars. And then he posts these things on social media or talks about it on his podcast. And there's a growing movement in the hunting community to stand up to this sort of activity. And when he discusses in his podcast, and we're talking about like overcrowding issues, he said, "Hey, dummies, just go find another trailhead. It's let them eat cake."
Right.
The rich boys are on this one. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. And I'm almost done here. The last thing I want to say is my wife is actually a migration lawyer in the same community as Ronald Reagan, and I just would like to say that it's a scary time. And for the first couple weeks, maybe a month of this presidency, she was coming home nightly, if not in tears, almost in tears. Her clients were in tears meeting with her, and I just want to encourage everybody to look at the people who these efforts are being taken against as our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, and to stand up for them, and because they are scared. And that's all I have to say. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. All right. Cast Iron Jake, Utah's specific plan is to actively take all the national public lands in Utah and then sell them off and privatize all of it. They spent a couple million trying to see the federal government sue. I think you mean the federal government over it.
It's the war on the public anything. It's enclosure. It's Tim Heidecker saying it's free real estate. That's what it is.
Dave from Jamaica, great point, Matt. I think people confuse working poor in rural areas with fail-son LARPers who pretend to be that. Yeah, I mean, it's the same people that confuse the folks that stormed the Capitol on January 6th with, like, working class Americans when they were owners of, like, pool cleaning companies from a suburb in, Missouri that could afford to fly to D.C. to storm the Capitol.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think, the category error with, like, the idea of a so-called small business owner is sometimes like, people in that, like, very conservative people who are pretty wealthy because they either like own a roofing company or like plumbers because plumbers do make a lot of money, or hot tub installment companies, things like that. They're small business owners, but they're also, that doesn't mean they can't possibly be reactionary or like, have very, very far right-leaning tendencies.
Right. Exactly right. Sorry. So let's, I've been meaning to do this and it's a little old, but, the 6, Bradley. Just because we're on this topic, Rick Perlstein, historian, we've had him on the show, posted this. It's just something that we need to be keeping in mind here because there was another airplane disaster, like right after we went on air yesterday, and it's unclear if the cuts affected this. And I don't want to draw any conclusions, but at the end of the day, like, we need to start to politicize airplanes falling out in the sky. Like, we should be having a grandstanding bill on the House floor brought by some Democrat that uses the name of one of the federal workers that has been fired. We just read this example of the 20-year disabled Army veteran who was fired from his job at a Bronx veterans hospital. He has 4 kids and has served his country admirably and for his entire life. Wrote to the VA secretary asking for his job back, saying, I'm a good performer, isn't getting it back. His name is Luke Graziani. Frankly, the Democrats should endorse the Luke Graziani bill, which protects the federal workforce from the gutting of the administrative state by a billionaire robber baron. They should also be introducing a bill that's like about, say, the Trump airplane crash bill, Doge airplane crash. I mean, I'm coming up with this off the top of my head. Come up with something more clever, but message this to the public, okay? We can't just have historians like Rick or shows like ours giving these examples. The Democrats have to demonstrate this on the House or the Senate floor whenever debate is open and put names to this, like the Lake and Riley Act, which they used to crack down on immigration. use this thing to your advantage. Bradley, go ahead.
I'm just saying they're always happy to brand something. They definitely have staffers who are literally hired to create these funny abbreviations for bills where it's like a New Jersey congressman like Josh Gottheimer choosing to be like, the Mooch Act to get other states to pay more in federal income taxes because New Jersey pays more for other lower end tax states in the country. Like, you can't do it for something like this when they're literally like, it's not even like the sky is falling. No, planes are literally falling out of the sky.
Falling out, and
that plane was upside down in Toronto.
Yes, and there were already a shortage of air traffic controllers. Then yesterday, Musk and Trump fired tens of probationary employees working in aviation safety. Again, these are just employees that have worked there for 2 years or under, or switched agencies who have less protections, so Musk can fire them if he wants. Still going to affect it. They're doing important work to aid and assist the air traffic controllers who are already understaffed. So Rick Perlstein has this example. This is from a friend of his who's a retired air traffic controller. This is the letter that he wrote today to his the other day to his senator. I wanted to read it for folks. Dear Senator, I'm writing as a constituent, former FAA air traffic controller for 26 years and currently airline transport related commercial pilot. On Friday, hundreds of FAA technicians and engineers were terminated. These technicians and engineers maintain every piece of equipment that keeps flying safe, from the radars to the ILS to the ATC automation. They were identified as probationary, and there is a reasonable speculation that AI was used to find probationary employees, assuming that meant that they were new hires. That is not an accurate assumption. A newly hired federal employee is probationary and may be subject to at-will termination, but the term probationary is also applied to promotions to describe not that you are a probationary employee, but if the promotion or transfer is not successful, the employee would return to the pre-promotion position. This allows the government to retain needed expertise. As I mentioned, those were the examples of people who became probationary because they moved from like one park or, to another, or from one agency to another, etc. This allows the government to, However, even that is not the case in these positions, as workers were indeed succeeding in their new roles. FAA technicians undergo years of specialized training to maintain mission-critical systems that cannot be replaced quickly. In the 30 years since I began my controller career, we have never had a surplus of technicians and engineers. To the contrary, it is a challenge to keep these jobs filled. Once our aviation safety infrastructure is compromised, it will take decades to bring it back. Money will not be saved and lives may be lost. We need your help to raise attention to this issue and use whatever tools of checks and balances available to undo this reckless action. Sincerely, Dylan Sullivan, who's the name of the friend of Rick Perlstein. We now know that Musk is trying to put SpaceX employees in these positions who do not have the qualifications. We just had the deadliest federal aviation disaster since 9/11 on U.S. soil, where 67 people were killed at Reagan, in the days after they announced these massive cuts, sending our systems of regulations into chaos. We know that it's less safe to fly, and the Flight Attendants Union will say this during government shutdowns for these very reasons. But it was put on steroids with these Doge cuts that came in, and then what do you know? A plane going into Reagan National Airport crashes with a military helicopter, and dozens of people die.
Because of an air traffic mistake, from what the appearances of it looks like so far.
And where are the Democrats? Everybody has a fear of flying. If the Republicans can tap into a fear of needles so that we don't have vaccines anymore, so it pretends like they care about our health as opposed to, funding universal health care or something like this, can the Democrats weaponize the fact that everybody in the world has a fear of flying and Republicans might make it more likely that you die in the air? I mean,
yeah.
Introduce a bill. Trump's aviation death bill, whatever. Make up some silly acronym. Or they could spend $6 million on consultants to come up with MAGA, what was it, Ultra MAGA
extreme MAGA Republicans.
Extreme MAGA Republicans.
Because MAGA just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll do people a favor. I'm not going to blame Democrats on this, but even though some of them supported the rush for profits that has led to the burdening certain airports about this. But the truth is,
it's okay. I checked that off.
In society, we are not investing in the right things. We should be investing more in schools, in air traffic, in the safety stuff. But the problem is that means less money for profiteer speculators like Elon Musk and all of his friends to play with and to make more riches, making money with money and not doing any work. But here's a piece in American history: the PATCO strike and the decline of labor. This is in American History Journal in 2021. In 1981, President Reagan decisively broke the strike in Federal Aviation Administration's air traffic controllers, which had been organized by their union. Because of this timing, its notoriety, and its impact in encouraging private sector employers to follow Reagan's example and break strikes, the PATCO debacle contributed significantly to the continuing decline of the labor movement through the decades following 1981. The breaking of PATCO took place at the crucial inflection point of U.S. labor. The walkout, which started on October 3rd, 1981, took place in every U.S. state and territory, and Americans watched it play out in real time on live television. They saw President Reagan warn strikers that since they were government workers, their walkout was illegal, issuing an ultimatum that they would be fired in 48 hours if they did not return to work. Then they saw President Reagan fire more than 11,000 strikers who defied his order, replacing them with military contractors and hastily trained substitutes, all with strong public backing. And I would say this is just a continuation of that. Whereas Reagan went after them, and both of the impetus is the exact same. The safety and the power of labor is secondary to the money, freeing up money for profiteer parasites to play with.
Yep. All right, guys. We'll have some more fun clips tomorrow. I mean, it's 2:30 already. Where does the time go?
Of Russell Brand talking about the selfie social contract.
Yeah, let's say that for tomorrow where we have more time, right? And you have to go, right? I would assume for left reckoning.
Eventually,
no?
yeah.
Eventually. But I did want to take this call really quickly. That'll be our final call of the day. Calling from an 813 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Emma. Hi, Matt. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Everyone's doing well. How are you doing?
Well, I'm really thankful that you took my call. My name is Annie Fitzgerald, and I've been a long-time listener. But a couple weeks back, Sam read a IM that Charlie DeGinmer sent on my behalf regarding raising funds for my GoFundMe because my chemotherapy copays went up, and they actually doubled this month. They went from like $100 to $200 per treatment. And Sam read my IM about my GoFundMe.
Right. And
MR people came out. Within like 2 days, y'all helped me raise about $3,000. And I just had to get on here to say thank you. Thank you so much to everyone. I am about 2/3 of the way to my goal. Right now, I'm raising funds so that I can continue to receive my chemotherapy treatment, as well as raise a copay for a desperately needed new wheelchair, because my wheelchair was actually broken on an airplane flight.
Oh my God.
And so it literally bent the frame, and it could break at any point. And the airline refused to fix it, and so I have to get a new one. And I am in school right now, and I am active within my DSA chapter, among other things that I'm doing. I also ran for state representative last year, and called in a couple times last year about that. But I just really, really wanted to call in and just say thank you so much to everyone I also want to thank the mods for continuing to share my links in chat.
We just put the link up,
because-
and we're going to put it in our description wherever people are listening to or watching this. But just sorry to cut you off, Annie, but I just want to give people
No, that's fine.
listening a sense. You've raised $3,955, and your goal is $6,000. So we're not too far away. And
Wow.
some folks in our audience, if you have either the ability to donate or if you could just share it on social media, it would be enormously helpful, because I'm so sorry that happened, Annie. I mean, your wheelchair getting damaged and then the airline not agreeing to pay for it, that doesn't sound shocking, unfortunately, to me, but it feels like we can definitely get you there, hopefully, with the help of our audience. So I appreciate you calling. How are you feeling right now?
Yes, thank you. I'm actually at treatment right now. And to be honest, I'm just really, really grateful to even be able to be at treatment right now, thanks to you guys. So I definitely plan on running for office again next year and continuing to do what I can to support my community. So I just really, really appreciate everyone for all the kind words and all the support, because honestly, it helps keep me going. So,
well, thanks,
thank
Annie,
you
and
so much.
I hope that we could be a little bit of a distraction as you're having your treatment. We're thinking of you, and we'll make sure to keep you in mind and keep your GoFundMe in mind as we keep as we go along with this broadcast this week. We won't forget it, and we'll continue to plug it. Okay.
Thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, stay strong, Annie. Cold Dog writes in. I mean, we love you. Yeah. So many nice messages. Yeah. Appreciate you, Annie. Thank you. We're going to turn off the phone lines, read some IMs, and get out of here.
One note from Pablo Manriquez at Pablo reports on Twitter. So far, we have no eyes into Gitmo, no phone calls in or out from to detainees, no press access, and a growing inmate population of Venezuelans with no confirmed criminal records or gang ties.
Who could have thought it?
Hey, but you can object to Trump as much as you want, but don't do it in a way that, Young Turks doesn't approve of.
It's just Dave Rubin again. It's really incredible how we just have seen the same playbook over and over. It's almost like it's lucrative. Mr. Melancholy, I work at the post office. We have a guy who drives a Cybertruck to work. I want to berate him every day.
Idiots. God, it's I mean, the good thing is I do think the I see less online about it. It's kind of went the way of the Apple VR goggles. Remember they were made a big splash when they released them. Does anybody talk about that anymore?
No one does. Yeah. Sent with lasers. Sorry. I have to fly a bunch this year for tour. I'm thinking I should just quit touring until Trump is out of office. I love it, but I'm not about to fall out of the sky so Elon could try to fill the hole in his heart with money that Hassan took from him when Grimes started spending time with Hassan.
I ultimately think you can fly. I'm not going to be afraid to take flights. I don't have any planned, but I think they are still rare. But they're still rare. But the issue is concern and a long-term one, which is that we are not investing in the right things in this country.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
The bipartisan.
We still don't know the effects of this mass firing of the FAA workers, hundreds of them. I know that it's probably safe, but it's definitely less safe than it was.
It's less safe than it was, absolutely. And the Build Back Better should have had a bunch of money for this sort of thing. And instead, what we get the messaging on it is Nancy Pelosi saying this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, which is her code to her donors saying, don't worry, we're still going to be frugal and austere in terms of spending. We don't have that luxury. This shit's falling apart. And Yeah, like I would probably, if I could take a train instead of a plane, probably do it.
Yeah, can this please be? I know Hayden Clarkin's been joking about this on Twitter, like, oh, now it's time for us to, I guess we're investing in transit. We're not, but it would be a great opportunity if that was like the goal, but it's not. It's about Elon.
Cybertruck Hyperloops.
Yeah, Elon wants, toy in space without daddy telling him no. Ostentatious. Emma, this is exactly right. Adopt a federal worker. Hakeem Jeffrey should be giving them his platform. Let him speak. Give these vultures at cable news the red meat that they want. Let the federal worker tell them what happened to them, and more importantly, who is to blame for it. Use it for politics and get back these people's jobs. Ryan from Rochester. A trans man was kidnapped and brutally tortured to death in Benton, New York. Will the Democrats bring up a bill to protect trans people?
No.
That abortion nurse, you have to wean off SSRIs just like you have to take a course of steroids. The weaning is just so your body can get back to regulating on its own. Dependence is not the same as addiction. It is very easy to wean and generally has no side effects other than the resumption of symptoms that were being treated by the SSRI. This is so ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, Morpheus writes in, SSRIs are indispensable in cases of severe depression. Sorry, mild to moderate cases are better treated with therapy and lifestyle change. What is that IMer's point? Absurd. H-dub, that is absolutely incorrect. SSRIs are flawed, but highly supported by the research as beneficial for anxiety and depression disorders. Yes.
There you go. No, don't draw us into these waters again, please.
Yes, yes.
Because I'm happy we swim out of it.
All right, 3 more. Anon, but not Q. Every government job I have started off as probationary. In my experience, it's just a way for them not to give you full benefits for the first 6 months or a year. Yeah, I mentioned that, but it's also just like standard for some of the agencies to get until you cross that 2-year threshold. But I explained it, I think, before. CPG, there you go again, Matt, forgetting how we need to funnel capital to the real heroes, the consultants. And the final IM of the day. Ultraviolet, the visuals for the M-Majority song are finished. Check your email. Subject, M-Majority Report visuals video.
Check out tomorrow, folks.
Ultraviolet, you are too kind. Oh, and tomorrow we'll be joined by one RM Brown in the fun half, which will be very fun.
Toilets.
Don't fully get... should I bring in my weed vape? Just to go to town with them? Honestly, it could be... Well, maybe I'll save it for 2 p.m. All right, guys. See you tomorrow.